Hey, what's up? It's Jared with Ditch Auto. I've got the Sony a6600 here, and I wanted to talk about my first shots with the camera. Now, I was excited about the a6600, really only for a couple of reasons. I had recently gotten rid of my a6500s because I wanted cameras with the flip-up screen. I had been doing a lot of videos like this where I wanted to have alternate angles, and the flip-up screen was going to make it so much easier for me to frame up my shots. I didn't need stabilization and stuff for those instances, but I quickly remembered that I do love having the stabilized sensor because most of the lenses that I have are not stabilized. So when I'm out shooting photos, utilizing the a6600 that has IBIS is definitely a much better experience. Now, in past videos, I've talked about a lot of different lenses. For example, this Viltrox 85mm f1.8 lens that's on here. It's a pretty inexpensive f1.8 85mm lens, and it performs really well. And on the a6600, it's just an absolute blast. And so when I'm out shooting with this, shooting photos, I'm not noticing really any difference between past cameras of recent years and this camera, other than the fact that when I go and shoot video, I'm getting much more stable footage out of this camera because a lot of these lenses don't have any form of stabilization. And so if your camera body doesn't have any stabilization, it's going to be hard to shoot those shots handheld, not have them be jittery, or even have some visible rolling shutter in there. So with the stabilized sensor, you're getting a lot of that minimized, and it makes it just much easier to use these as a secondary camera or as a camera that you would shoot video with. Now, the few reasons that I did end up deciding to purchase one of these is the fact that it takes the larger Sony battery that is what the Sony a7 III, the Sony a7R and S line of cameras use now. Those larger batteries are great and you get better battery life out of them. And I'm glad that they added it to this particular camera. I think it's something that they would have had to do because there really isn't a whole lot else that's different between this camera and an a6500 or really even an a6400. So another thing that this does is it has a fully articulating screen that pops up so that you can go into that selfie mode essentially. I utilize that often because I will use this camera as a secondary camera in a scenario like this, or an overhead camera, and there are lots of instances where a standard Sony camera that doesn't have an articulating screen that goes all the way over like that, I have a hard time framing up my shot. And so I don't necessarily need it for anything other than that, but when I'm trying to set up the cameras to film myself, I don't have anybody else around to help me frame up the shot. It's a lot of getting up and moving around and trying to figure out if your shot is correct, utilizing the smartphone app, which sometimes it changes your settings, and it's just kind of a pain sometimes. So I like having the flip-up screen for that purpose. Of course, I like having the monitoring capabilities here. So with the port on the side for being able to plug in both headphones and a microphone into the side is very nice because a lot of times I really couldn't monitor my audio going into any of my other smaller cameras. Of course, with my a7 III and bigger cameras like that, I can, and that's great, but with the smaller cameras that I often use, just our standalone cameras, I want to be able to monitor the audio and get it set right, and you just can't do that. You're basically going off of the meters, or you're recording a clip of audio and then going and playing it back on another device, and it's really kind of a pain in the butt. So I like having that feature as well. I'm not missing the fact that this doesn't have a pop-up flash. This camera doesn't have the pop-up flash that the predecessors of this camera have, and that's fine because I don't think the pop-up flash is that good, and a camera like this needs an external flash either connected to the hot shoe or something that's wirelessly triggered from another location. You just need to go to that level if you want to get good, well-lit photos using artificial light. You can't do that with the little pop-up flash. And I've talked about in other videos with the a6400 and probably the a6500 and maybe even earlier versions of the camera, how I would manipulate that little flash to try and bounce light off of the ceiling instead. But it was never a great solution to the problem. I like the fact that the flash is just gone because now I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I'm shooting in a really low light situation and I need artificial light, I'm going to put some sort of an external flash flash in the hot shoe, or I'm going to use some other sort of an artificial lighting device like a standalone LED panel or something like that. I'll link to the one that I use down below. I wish that I had it in front of me right now so that I could show it to you, because the LED panels are kind of game changers and they make it really easy to light a scene and have all of that set up. So other than that, I mean, there isn't a whole lot that's changed with the camera. And so if you're looking for a comparison, which I'm going to do a comparison between the a6400 and this camera, because a lot of people did go out and buy the a6400 for the flip up screen. They're using it for vlogging and other stuff like that. And so I want to do a comparison for all of you between those two cameras. I can already tell you that image quality, the only difference that you're going to see is in lower light situations, where the slowing down of the shutter speed, you can go a lot further with this camera because it has internal stabilization. And so when you slow down that shutter, the stabilization can kind of kick in and still keep your shot nice and sharp. Of course, moving objects are subject to blur. It doesn't matter what you do with your camera if you go with a slower shutter, but in holding your camera and shooting in lower light situations, the shake that you would give to the scene is minimized. And then, of course, shooting video with a camera like this, because of the stabilization, is just so much better having the stabilization than not, because most of the lenses that I'm shooting with are Sony full frame lenses, because I have other full frame cameras that I want to utilize those lenses on. And because of the full frame lenses, a lot of them don't have stabilization unless they are zoom lenses. There are some prime lenses that do have stabilization, but there are not too many of them that do. So with this particular Viltrox lens that's on here, it's a nice combo. It's an inexpensive 85mm f1.8 lens that just produces beautiful images, especially for the cost of the lens. And it's a full frame lens, so I can utilize it on this camera. I can utilize it on my a7 III. And it's just a great overall lens. I've talked about it in a video, as I mentioned before, and I'll link to that below. And I'll link to a couple of other lenses that I use commonly with this camera. Not all of them are higher end like G Master lenses, although lately I've been shooting a lot with this camera and the 24mm G Master lens. It's just a great combination with this camera, but it is a little more expensive. Now, I also have a variety of 35mm lenses that I'm going to do a comparison on, and I'll be utilizing the a6600 with that. So I have several videos coming out soon with the a6600. Top settings to change video is usually a pretty popular one, and I want to do that with this camera as well. So make sure to click that subscribe button to be notified when I put out new videos, especially for the a6600. So I've showed you some photos and talked about the performance and just the way that I feel about this camera. It's a little too early for me to give you a full review of the camera, as I've just utilized it for fun, and I haven't done a job with this camera yet. Most of the time I am utilizing these cameras as B cameras, kind of backup and secondary angles and stuff like that, kind of set and forget type of cameras. I'm utilizing my a7 III, a7R line of cameras for more of my primary shooting. And then if you've been following along on this channel, you know that I've also been playing with the Nikon mirrorless cameras and the Canon mirrorless cameras as well. So there's been a lot going on this channel lately, and it spans the gamut almost of mirrorless cameras. So make sure to subscribe, because I'm testing these cameras, I'm trying them out in different situations, and I want to bring all of those experiences back to share with all of you so that you can make the best decisions when it comes to purchasing. So if you are interested in learning more about this camera, about shooting in manual mode, check out my free course called Ditch Auto, Start Shooting in Manual. It will help you understand manual mode on your camera so you can get the best quality image out of your camera possible. It's a free course. You could sign up using the link below, and that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions, I will answer them to the best of my ability down in the comment section below. So talk with me there, and I hope to see you back in the next one. Take care.